the process of evaluation, the team that was put together to conduct the evaluation. It was a team that I had the opportunity to lead. The activities that included research activities, not just evaluation activities, and report on some of the results and share with you the conclusions that we as a group are drawing, we as an evaluation group are drawing about this project. Exist anywhere except on paper. It is the name of the proposal that was submitted to the U.S. Department of Education Star Schools program in the year 2001 to seek Star Schools funding. It was the brainchild of an activity that was conducted in Teh South Dakota in 2000, a conclave on distance education that was coordinated by a number of folks, but was the inspiration of the former Governor William Jankley. I'd like to show you a little clip from a video about that.
Set to launch in the fall of 2000, the Digital Dakota Network, also known as the DDN, provides for interactive television, high-speed internet, local and wide area networking. The purpose of the DDN is to integrate technology into the learning process to quickly and permanently raise the level of education in the state of South Dakota, so the children of today and tomorrow will have the knowledge and skills to compete on a global level.
This is the one last chance for South Dakota to move from one of the lower ends of the economic ladder in America to the very top. There is no more important venture that we're working on in the state today.
Governor Janklow's Capital City Conclave on Distance Education was a two-day event held in July 2000. The purpose of the conclave was to gather the information necessary to determine the most efficient way to implement the Digital Dakota Network.
These are things that the group that I was responsible for had an obligation to evaluate and to report on: faculty development, causes of education, videos for teacher information and training, action research, curriculum units, special events, and a number of other activities. The faculty development activities involve individuals from Nova Southeastern University going to each of the public university teacher education programs and conducting a two-day faculty development workshop on the foundations of distance education. Here's our good friend that some of you will recognize, Charlie Slauson, working at Black Hills State up the road. I was hoping some Black Hills State people would show up today. We're going to visit there tomorrow. And these were workshops that dealt with how you incorporate distance education skills and activities and competencies into the teacher education curriculum. We brought in experts from around the country, not only live, but by compressed video, and we conducted one of these workshops at each of the 5 public universities in South Dakota. They were a lot of fun, and according to the evaluation data, were relatively successful. Also, South Dakota Public Television was responsible for producing a series of 6 training videos.
Great, let's get started. Welcome to the video series, Foundations of Distance Education. This series was funded by the South Dakota Alliance for Distance Education, South Dakota Star Schools Project. In South Dakota and elsewhere, distance education is becoming a basic approach to teaching and learning. Our classrooms are becoming rooms with views, largely because of the power of technology such as the Digital Dakota Network. In order to understand the potential of the Digital Dakota Network, new skills are required. One area is the operation and use of the DDN classroom. I've asked a specialist in the operation of the VTEL equipment to join us today over the network. The topic of this video is operation of a DDN classroom.
Research activity, the action research activity culminated in the publication of an encyclopedia of research on distance education in South Dakota. 8 scholarly research papers that were to a person conducted by individuals from the state of South Dakota, teachers, professors, people who were involved in some aspect of education within the state. Curriculum units and special events were all also evaluated by the evaluation team, which consisted of myself as lead evaluator, an evaluation coordinator, my co-presenter on this session, Mr. Steve Wheeler from the University of Plymouth, England, who obviously for a lot of reasons couldn't be here for the session, but helped me put it together. 4 professional evaluators drawn from the ranks of education professionals in the state of South Dakota, 2 evaluation assistants who were graduate students in programs in instructional technology in South Dakota. We had a professional editor who looked at all the documents and edited them and put them into a more presentable format. There was a 3-member second-tier team. The purpose of the second tier is to come to South Dakota at the end of the project. Some of them, they are all with us here today, to take a look at what was accomplished, not only from the standpoint of the evaluation activities, but from project management and project partners, and to bring a fresh perspective into the activities and the evaluation of those activities for the South Dakota Alliance for Distance Education. A fairly straightforward one. A team was identified. None of us had met, well, none of us, most of us had not met each other before we began the evaluation process, so there was a series of activities, face-to-face and online activity, where we got to know each other better, where we were trained in the process of evaluation that was to be followed, and where we began to understand this rather extensive project, the South Dakota Alliance for Distance Education. Activities were assigned to members of the evaluation group. Each evaluation member was assigned to a team, a blue team and a green team. The evaluation team consisted of 2 professional evaluators and 1 graduate assistant. That group was responsible for a certain number of the activities, evaluating a certain number of the activities for the South Dakota Alliance for Distance Education. The project lead evaluator and the project evaluation coordinator were responsible for a number of additional activities, specifically those related to project management or project oversight or project fiscal responsibilities. But the evaluation team then has spent the last 2 years working with the partners, visiting the schools, visiting the colleges, and actually talking to people that are doing the evaluation. You approach to distance education, which is a 5-part evaluation process where first accountability is ascertained. Accountability is, did the project do what it was supposed to do? Effectiveness is some way to ascertain how well done were the activities of the project. Third is the impact that those activities had on the educational system that they were embedded in. Obviously, as you move up this hierarchy from accountability to effectiveness to impact, it becomes more difficult, more problematic to obtain results and to reach conclusions. But I'm going to report on some of those in a few seconds. The organizational context within which the project existed, looking at the structure, looking at the policies, looking at the issues, how well they were implemented, how they might have been implemented more effectively, what ideas could be shared with others that are working in similar kind of and similar comprehensive organizations. And then the interesting part for most evaluators is the unanticipated outcomes. What happened that you didn't think was going to happen at the beginning? How many people decided they wanted to go to graduate school in the field because they had an action research grant? How many people made presentations at conferences because they got enthusiastic about distance education? How many schools and colleges added second classrooms because they began to realize the potential of distance education? Those kinds of things reported on. Well, we used a participant evaluation process. The evaluation teams actually attended and participated in as many of the activities of project partners as was possible. Now, that wasn't always possible, but as often as it was possible, the members of the blue team or the green team or the lead evaluator, the evaluation coordinator, or the graduate assistant would actually go to the school, go to the location, go to the training site, and attend along with those people who were being trained or those individuals who were actually conducting the project. We did site visits to schools. One of the most important activities was the visitation of 31 schools. At least a day was spent in each of those schools. The team of 2 evaluators would go to the school, They would have focus groups of teachers. They would have focus groups of administrators. They individually interview administrators. They visit the DDN classroom. They go to the teacher's lounge and talk to people. And in almost every case, they also went out into the community, tried to find a lunchroom or a cafeteria or someplace and ask people about the schools and ask people about distance education. That report, the site visit report, is also interesting reading and a cross-section of how distance education is being implemented in the state of South Dakota. A follow-up to that is that 11 of the school superintendents from the site visit schools were called about 6 months after the site visits to talk to them about what they perceived as the superintendent's role related to the adoption of distance education. They were interviewed by a researcher on the team. They were asked questions about distance education, the role that the superintendent felt was important. And as a follow-up to the site visit activities, and I'll report on that in a second. Statewide surveys, there were 2 statewide surveys conducted where a random sample of teachers in the state were sent a 5-part survey that asked them questions about themselves, about innovativeness, about their schools, and about distance education and its adoption. And that was done twice, once at the beginning of the project, once at the end, to sort of establish a baseline for comparison purposes. Focus groups were conducted with teachers in meetings. Research was conducted by teachers, and the second-tier evaluation was an activity that actually went back and looked at it. The results are all yet not in, and the specifics behind the conclusions that I'm going to share with you today are still in the process of being written, but let's share them anyway. First of all, let's talk about the site visits. 31 schools, 2 evaluators, focus groups with teachers, administrators, examinations of the documents, pictures were taken, and a summary report was written. That summary report that I shared with you, as I say, makes interesting reading, and the summary report for the site visits in general provides a profile of how these 31 schools are incorporating distance education. When asked, teachers are relatively positive about it. They're not enthusiastically positive, but they are quite positive about it in green. But teachers see there are a number of problems with using the DDN. Problems which range upon a scale from managerial, administrative kinds of problems to the other end of what does it mean for education, what does it mean for training students, what does it mean for me as a teacher. Teachers express the need for additional staff development and training. They want continued support, and teachers want, and I left this blank, incentives, some reason to be teaching differently. They express that a number of times. If you're familiar with what's happened in South Dakota, the TTLs, Technology for Teaching and Learning Academies, and the DTLs, Distance Teaching and Learning Academies, have provided teachers, at least a substantial subset of the teachers of the state of South Dakota, with those incentives and some of those the opportunity to try out new technologies and distance education. Teachers say they want more. Use distance education more. Teachers and administrators lack understanding. They don't really understand some of the power and potential of distance education, as I say, generally, and the DDN specifically. The examples of some of the uses were, well, we can have more staff meetings, we can interact with people at other schools without having to travel, and the more curricularly significant applications were mentioned much less commonly by superintendents. They talked about the need for incentives. My teachers are so busy already, I am trying to provide them with incentives, but since this is a statewide network, the State Department of Education needs to be considering providing incentives also. And more opportunities to use. This is back to trialability in terms of whatever Roger said. Statewide teacher survey. At the same time this was going on, a second statewide teacher survey was conducted. Random survey, a list of teachers, 200 teachers were sent surveys, about 125 were returned after 3 follow-ups. 5-part survey, demographics, teacher innovativeness, school innovativeness, knowledge about distance education, and then very interesting open-ended comments. There was a ongoing process of compilation, analysis, and comparison to the previous survey. Average age of teachers in South Dakota that completed the survey, which is consistent with other data that we have, is about 44 years, 17 years in teaching, which is about the national average. The average teacher longevity for teachers in the schools is about 17 years. Experience in distance education on a scale 1 to 4, they consider themselves to be about 2.3, which is low middle. competence in instructional technology, 2.1, which is low middle. Their personal innovativeness is lower than the national average, but they consider their school's level of innovativeness to be about the average nationally. Some questions about distance education asked of the teachers. On a 6-point scale, do they believe that distance education can improve education in the state of South Dakota? Relatively positive, 4.7. And is my school ready for distance education? Relatively positive, 4.5. Do they know a great deal about distance education? Surprisingly enough, they say no, 2.9, in spite of all the activities that have been ongoing for the last several years in the state. College supporting, sort of neutral. Their personal level involvement, sort of neutral. And is staff development necessary? Extremely high on this scale in terms of what teachers felt is needed in order for distance education to continue to grow in the state of South Dakota. And the most innovative person, the person the teachers say that they emulate most often, is other classroom teachers. Everett Rogers talks about innovations and whether they are adopted or not, and I would ask you to think about cell phones. A decade ago, you had to be convinced of the need for a cell phone. Advertisements on television would talk about things you could do, the advantages to cell phone use. You can get a call anywhere if there's an emergency, if your car breaks down, your children have trouble, if there's something happening at home. Having that portable telephone with you gives you the opportunity to respond to those needs or to answer those problems or to be more flexible in your lifestyle. The South Dakota project has been accountable to the objectives and activities that it was responsible for. It has had significant impact in a number of areas that I've only touched upon. I've given some notable examples. But in South Dakota, distance education has not reached the point of critical mass where it will continue to be adopted without the need for external intervention. Change agents coming in and say, use this technology. And so we want distance education to continue to grow in the state of South Dakota. There is going to need to be continued support from the state level in the state of South Dakota.